And welcome back to another episode of Locked On Chiefs. A lot to talk about today. We have Mark Schofield in the studio with us to talk about Patrick Mahomes and how these receivers are going to really affect him and affect this Chiefs offense when we get back on Locked On Chiefs.
From the land of the free and the home of the Chiefs, this is the Locked On Chiefs podcast.
Hey, Chiefs Kingdom, welcome back for another episode of Locked On Chiefs, your daily podcast covering the Kansas City Chiefs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for always making Locked On Chiefs your first listen of the day. Don't forget, we're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube as well. I am Chris Clark. You can find me on Twitter at Chiefs Corner. I'm the founder of Chiefs Corner, and there we're going to be talking about salary cap analytics and statistics. Today with me, I'm really excited to talk to Mark Schofield, and I'll let you tell everybody where they can find you because I know you're all over the place.
Well, Chris, thanks for having me. Always great to be on with you, buddy. USA Today's Touchdown Wire is probably the easiest place, but a couple of different SB Nation sites, Big Blue View, Bleeding Green Nation, Pat's Pulpit blog, and the boys. But the easiest way of all is on Twitter at Mark Schofield, where you can keep up with all the stuff I got going on.
Well, Mark, like I said, I really appreciate having you on. Really always love your insight into quarterbacks and quarterback play. If you're not following him on Twitter, you're doing it wrong. Go follow Mark Schofield to talk. And he talks a lot about the quarterback play. Let's go ahead and talk and jump in really quick because we haven't talked to you since the end of the season. And I feel bad about that. But it's kind of been a whirlwind for the Chiefs lately. But you look at the Chiefs and that AFC Championship game. Did you see anything that stuck out to you between the first half and second half?
Well, I mean, I think really, Chris, what stood out was defensively from the Cincinnati Bengals. And I know it's been talked about a ton, but, you know, that drop 8 coverage, dropping 8, you know, really just rushing 3 and trying to force the quarterback to be patient and to pick his spots and to really sort of work through tighter throwing lanes, that really started to take its toll. And what was interesting about the combine a couple of weeks ago, talking to different quarterbacks, hearing from them what teams are asking them about, 2 in particular, Carson Strachan, Matt Corral. Teams were asking them about drop 8. Teams were asking them about how they dealt with it, about how Mississippi and Nevada respectively dealt with it. And I really think that that is going to be perhaps the next wave of defensive evolution. It's something I've been kicking around in my head past couple of weeks now, is that first it was all the cover 2 stuff, right? The 2 deep, the cover 2, cover 4 quarters, whatever you want to call it. You know, try to keep everything in front of you. And certainly Chiefs fans are well aware of, you know, the impact that had on the Chiefs passing game at the start of the year. I think the next step is now drop 8, you know, whether it's single high, 2 high, but having those 8 defenders in coverage, really sort of constricting throwing lanes, really forcing quarterbacks to, like I said, be patient, take what defenses are going to give them, check the football down, break tackles after the catch. And it's funny, Chris, for all of the, you know, strife and angst people have about all the Big 12, they don't play defense. A lot of what we're seeing coming up to the NFL and a lot of what we're seeing work its way into NFL playbooks offensively and defensively, in particular in the defensive side of the ball, is stuff that they're doing in the Big 12. And so I think that really sort of stands out to me. Cincinnati's adjustment to that drop 8 stuff, and then the patience that it requires of the quarterback and how it wasn't quite there at the end when Kansas City needed it the most.
Yeah, and the reason I'm sitting here chuckling is because everybody thinks of the Big 12, at least I think of the Big 12 as a league that doesn't play defense very much. So
yeah,
just kind of funny.
But you look at, for example, Iowa State, their 3 safety stuff, that, you know, joker safety that's run in the middle of the field with really it's a 2 deep with that. It's basically Tampa 2, but with a safety. We're seeing a lot of that at the NFL level. And I do think that, you know, next fall when we're seeing, you know, how the season unfolds, it really wouldn't surprise me if we're seeing more and more teams. We know it's a copycat league, right?
Right.
And when you're thinking about this AFC at large right now and all the weapons that are in the AFC and in the AFC West, you think, all right, how defenses are going to handle that? I think we'd see a lot more of what Cincinnati did in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, and I do think that that's going to be something to watch, especially when you start getting to other QBs and how they're going to adjust. Josh Allen is going to have to adjust to that. Justin Herbert is going to have to adjust to that. Now you have Russell Wilson in the AFC West as well. He'll have to adjust. I do think defenses are going to start playing to that, and I think that's going to be something that's going to be intriguing to see how teams deal with that next year. And I think, in a way, Kansas City is actually going to be ahead of the curve because they're already knowing that it's going to be coming, so they're planning for it now.
Yeah, I mean they've seen it. They've, you know, they had some success with it at times, but it's just because they weren't able to make the plays they needed to, in the stretch and down the stretch and regulation, certainly in overtime. But they've seen it. They're ready for it. They've got a couple of ideas now of how to go about attacking it. For other teams, it's going to be a new thing. Now, teams always adjust. And so I'm sure offenses coming into next season will have some things that they're teaching their quarterbacks to do, have some concepts that they'll have in the game plan for these coverages. But I think that's like sort of the next evolution of defensive football. Like that's where the league is going to trend.
And when we get back, Mark, I do want to talk to you more about Patrick Mahomes and how he's going to adjust, one, to that, but also to the new receivers that he's got in Kansas City, because that is changing a little bit. And if you would have asked me before the offseason, I would not have bet that Kansas City's top three would probably take a hit. And obviously that has changed. Tyreek Hill has been shipped to the Miami Dolphins, but you could have bet something like that on BetOnline. After months of playing college basketball, we have determined the top teams. The Final Four is actually here for this national championship coming up this week. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, you name it. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your latest sports developments, including podcasts and reviews for all the leagues this season. It's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all sporting wagering information needs, including live betting in your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, so now we're going to jump into a little bit more of a fun conversation as to how Kansas City is really going to adjust going forward, because this is going to be something that's a lot different without Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, it's going to be very different, Chris. I mean, what you're losing in Tyreek Hill is a multifaceted offensive weapon, somebody that's able to provide you explosive plays in the downfield vertical passing game. You certainly see that element with Tyreek Hill. You also see the ability to create after the catch, whether it's the catch and run touchdown he had against the Bills when he's working the intermediate areas of the field, or even some of what he does in the quick game, RPO game, where it's just you throw him the ball on a hitch on a bubble and a quick throw to the flat, and he turns a 3-yard throw, a 2-yard throw behind the line of scrimmage into a first down, into a gain of 15, 20, 25 yards. The pieces that they've added, they're nice complementary type receivers, but they don't have the explosive playmaking skills, both at the catch point and after the catch, that Tyreek Hill offers. And I think, that's not a surprise to anybody listening to the show. But I do think that there's a way to get sort of MVS and Juju into this offense, and that there are things that they do well as receivers that will complement this passing game. When you look at MVS, a lot of the explosive plays that he generated were on deeper breaking routes breaking off the vertical stem, whether it's the middle of the field on post, whether it's to the outside on corners or outside, fade routes. And he's able to get separation. And what's interesting is they use him a lot on the inside, sort of getting him some favorable matchups against slot corners, against safeties sometimes. And it wouldn't surprise me to see if Andy Reid, if Eric Bieniemy try to get him some favorable matchups on the inside as well. With Juju, he's very much sort of your bigger slot type receiver. Again, he can give you stuff over the middle. He's got no fear about working over the middle of the field. You might see a lot of concepts where you've got both him on one side and Travis Kelce on the other, sort of stress in the middle of the field, while you've got Hardman and MVS on the outside trying to stretch the outside of the field. You can still run some vertical-based passing concepts with these new receivers in the fold. But what I'm most curious about, Chris, is the chemistry between Tyreek Hill and Patrick Mahomes, particularly in scramble throw situations. I've been chatting with you for a long time about Mahomes and his ability, his willingness, his creativity to make plays outside of the pocket off of the structure of the play. And when you have a receiver that's on the same page like Tyreek Hill, that makes it so much easier. You go watch a lot of their explosive plays over the time they had spent together in Kansas City. In those scramble drill moments, they're always on the same page. They're right in sync. Their minds are working together. When Hill sees the pocket sort of break down, he knows which way to break. He knows where Mahomes wants to go. Mahomes knows that Tyreek is going to mirror him. He's going to be where he needs to be in those scramble drill moments. That takes time to sort of build that sort of trust. And it's going to be curious to see, if Hardman steps into sort of a role like that, where he's the guy that Mahomes is going to look to, because it's one thing about, 3rd and 7, who you're looking to on structure. But when the play starts to break down, where is 15 going to look? Is he going to look for Juju Smith-Schuster? Is he going to look for Hardman? What's he going to do in those scramble drill moments? Or is he going to look for Travis Kelce now? Is he going to have more of a role in those types of situations? And so when plays start to break down next year, that's when I'm most curious to see, Chris. Where does 15's eyes, where do they go when he has to vacate the pocket?
Well, and it's a very big question because, you lose not only Tyreek Hill, but you lose Demarcus Robinson, you lose Byron Pringle. Those are guys that have been in the offense for a very long time, and Mahomes trusts them. And they're not necessarily on the same page as Tyreek Hill and Patrick, but they were pretty close. Byron was almost always in the place where Patrick was expecting him to be. So you're looking at a completely different receiver core other than maybe Hardman this year. And I think that's going to be a big step into see how this plays out. And I also think it's interesting that they're going with a different receiver type. You look at Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Yeah, he's a burner in some regards, but he's also 6'4".
Yeah.
Juju 6'2", 6'3", whatever you want to say, depends on where you look. That's a completely different type of wide receiver than what they've been looking at in the past.
Yeah, it's a bit of a sort of philosophical shift, Chris, and you wonder if the idea is, look, the shifty sort of guy that Tyreek Hill is and the ability to sort of create out of the slot. Okay, that's great and all, but we also now have an ability, guys with the bigger catch radius, the ability to sort of become that quarterback's best friend. It's interesting. I was doing a show with Alec Pierce, the Cincinnati wide receiver, who's one of the sort of prototypical X types in this draft class, and talking to him about it and how he was stressing the importance of being that kind of receiver, right? The ability to, on a back shoulder throw or a throw that's slightly off target, still be able to go get that ball. And with the guys that they've added and the catch radiuses that they have that ability to be that sort of ball winner type, to be that guy that can turn a sort of throw that's to the back shoulder, a little bit off target, into a reception. Tyreek Hill is a gifted wide receiver, tremendously talented, one of the best in the game. But what these guys bring to the table is that ability to win at the catch point. And sometimes that's something that's missed when you're talking about offenses, you're talking about receivers, because you've got really good defenders on the other side of the ball, guys that can be disruptive at the catch point, and players like MVS, like Juju, that can sort of win at that catch point, that can turn, throw it slightly off target, or to turn, a coverage situation where it looks like that defender's in good position into a reception or a first down. That's also pretty nice to have in the toolkit. So this might be sort of a philosophical shift towards, let's get guys that can sort of win at the catch point, that can, outwork guys at the point of contact and get first downs that way.
Yeah, and I think, Ryan and I talked about this on Tuesday's show, but one of the things that really sticks out to me is Patrick Mahomes has led the NFL, I think, the past couple of seasons in throwing to wide receivers that have great separation. I don't know that that's going to be the case anymore in Kansas City. I think he's going to have to change the way he throws and the way he goes through his progressions, at least. And you're absolutely right. When you look at these types of wide receivers, I think he's going to have to change the way he's doing things and be throwing to more tight windows. And these are the kinds of guys that can go and get the ball.
Yeah. And, and this is sort of, in a way, the evolution of what we expected to see from the Chiefs with Mahomes, right? It's, okay, now it's time to sort of raise the level of play with everybody around you. And this is sort of that rookie into second contract conundrum with quarterbacks. It's once they get that deal, it's time for them to do a little bit more. Not to say that Patrick Mahomes wasn't doing a ton when he was on his rookie deal, but now it's okay. If we can't keep all this talent around you, if we can't have situations where you're throwing to guys that are like Tyreek Hill 3, 4, 5 yards open, right, you've got to hit some tight windows. You've got to put the ball where it needs to be. You've got to navigate these drop aid coverages. And this could also be, in a sense, Chris, the Kansas City Chiefs realizing that if we're going to face this drop aid stuff, we need guys that can be comfortable in contact, comfortable in tight spaces. When you're trying to thread the needle between two underneath defenders out of those 8 that are dropping into coverage, you've got to have receivers that, if you can't get open over the top of them, can work into space and work in those tight quarters. And I think this might be a nod, this move towards these types of receivers. And yeah, we saw what Cincinnati is going to do. We know the teams are going to do this against us. Now we can have some guys that, okay, if we don't have somebody open over the top against this stuff, we've got guys that can be physical underneath against 2 or 3 defenders at the catch point.
Yeah, and when we get back, I want to talk a little bit more, because I think another thing that these types of wide receivers bring to the table is, I think it's going to change the running game for Kansas City a little bit as well, because you have guys that can now block, and I'm really curious to see how that is going to go into the draft. It sounds like Kansas City is trying to make a trade and get another wide receiver, but it still wouldn't surprise me if they draft somebody. So when we get back, we'll be talking about that. All right, so when we start looking at the body types of these wide receivers, obviously they're a lot different than what they had. And we don't know right now. It's been said Kansas City's looking at adding another top wide receiver, and I'm curious as to who that could be. A lot of names floating around out there. But going into the draft as well, watching who they draft, I think will also tell you if there's really going to be a change in philosophy. Because if you look at the guys that they got now, you can see them getting upfield and blocking, especially with 8 in the box, with 8 dropping into coverage. You're going to be able to run more.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you see teams like the Los Angeles Rams and you see teams like the Green Bay Packers and other teams on sort of that coaching tree where they're using those, whether it was like, for example, Robert Woods with the Los Angeles Rams as that sort of insert blocker, right? You're going wide zone, outside zone, you're doing some flow action, but you have that guy in a wing in a slot and he's coming and getting up to the second level and giving you a sort of not a fully a +1, but giving you an extra body instead of just trying to run somebody off or just letting them sort of stalk and mirror a corner. Now you're asking those guys to come in and take on safeties, take on linebackers at times. When you have the ability to do that, it allows you to change the numbers from an offensive standpoint. And that's also part of where this game is being played. Can you get the +1 offensively, or can you get everything gap coverage from a defensive standpoint? Can you get your run sets fitted up from a defensive standpoint? When you have wide receivers that can insert and block like that, it changes the numbers calculus. And so, with Juju, with MVS, they're guys that are bigger, that are willing to do that kind of stuff, that have been asked to do that kind of stuff in the previous teams. And so that might then free up this organization to decide, okay, at some point, if we want to then try to replicate what we lost with Tyreek Hill, not that you're going to find that guy in this draft, but say, look, we're sitting on the clock. We've got 2 picks now at 29 and 30. We could package those. We could move around a little bit, however we want to do it. But we could go get ourselves a Jameson Williams. We could perhaps get a Chris Olave or a Garrett Wilson. So now, in addition to having those bigger type guys that give you the catch radius, the contested catch stuff, and can do the blocking stuff, now you'd add another explosive weapon in one of those guys. And that would certainly be an approach that wouldn't surprise me at all, because it would give you sort of the best of both worlds. And so I am very curious to see what Kansas City does with those 2 picks. Do they package them and get up for one of these receivers? Do they wait and see who comes into the 20s and say, oh, look, Bill Belichick loves to trade out. Jameson Williams is on the clock at 21. He's available and the Patriots are on the clock. We can go get him. Or, there's a lot of things you can do when you have those 2 first-round picks. And so in this receiver class, it's very much a sort of pick your preference, pick your flavor type of group. I don't think, given the guys that they've added, they're going to look at sort of the X types like a Drake London or Treylon Burks, but the shiftier guys might be in play for them, given the fact that what they added in those 2 guys, Juju and MVS, and what they lost in Tyreek Hill.
And I'm really curious. I know we've had people say Jameson Williams, even before they got rid of Tyreek Hill.
Right.
Who is the guy that you would like to see in Kansas City? If Jameson Williams is that guy, who's another one that you would like to see in Kansas City?
I mean, Jameson Williams is certainly that type of player. Whether he's wide receiver 1, 2, 3 on somebody's board, I mean, I think it is very much a pick your poison class. I am very much a fan of Chris Olave. I love him from a route running perspective. I think he's a tremendous technician when it comes to running routes. He gives you pretty much a complete route tree out of the box, and I think that's an important skill set to have. As you start sort of thinking later in the first round, say those guys are gone, I don't know if he's a first-round pick because of what he does and where he was used and where he might be used most often in the NFL, but I really like Sky Moore. I think he's probably somebody that's going to play mostly in the slot, but his ability to beat press-aligned defenders, yes, he was playing at Western Michigan, but you see the hand usage, you see the release package, you see how he can get away from press-aligned defenders pretty much almost instantly after the snap. That's something that's tough to learn sometimes for receivers coming out of college, because they don't always see somebody lined up right across the field, right across the line of scrimmage from them. Sometimes they need time to adjust to being in press coverage. Sky Moore can do it out of the box. I mean, I don't know if he'd be in play for them at 29 and 30. He's probably an early second-round guy, but we see strange things happen at the end of the first round. And another guy, Jahan Dotson from Penn State, another sort of explosive vertical type slot guy, has a little bit, I think, of Christian Kirk in him. But as you start thinking about, okay, if the top tier guys are gone and you're looking at, the end of the first round, those are some sort of names to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I like what you're saying about the wide receivers. There are a lot of different wide receivers in this class. I think that's going to help Kansas City. The one thing that I think is going to be interesting, and I want to get your opinion on this, I know Kansas City's not going to be looking for a quarterback, but I think this could really play into what happens with Kansas City on draft day. How many QBs do you think are going in the first round this year?
It's funny, Chris. Say what you want about Vegas, right? But they know exactly how to put the number, because last I saw it was 3.5 was the over-under. And I vacillate between, we're just going to see the 3, or we'll see a 4th guy sneak in maybe at the end of the first round. I'm sitting here right now. I think 4 get in. And in terms of when they start coming off the board, I mean, the teams that are sort of in play, right? Maybe Detroit at 2. You're hearing rumblings about Malik Willis, Carolina at 6, Atlanta at 8, Seattle at 9. Like, those are teams that sort of are in the top 10 that you might see quarterbacks come off the board. And if we get to late April and Baker Mayfield is still a Cleveland Brown and Jimmy Garoppolo is still in San Francisco, there are going to be some teams that are going to be feeling a little bit panicky about their quarterback situation, whether it's Atlanta and Marcus Mariota, whether it's Seattle and Geno Smith, Drew Lock, whether it's Carolina and Sam Darnold. You might see some teams sort of panic. And so if you're a team like Kansas City that doesn't need to address quarterback, you want to see 5 go in the first round. You want to see 6 go in the first round, because that's going to push some really talented players down to the bottom of the first round. And so,
that's exactly why I asked, because I knew that's where you would go with that.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a Chiefs fan, what you want to hear over the next couple of weeks is Carson Strong got a clean bill of health. First of all, that's the first thing you want to hear, because he's got round 1 arm strength. He's got round 1 talent. It's just the medical piece. If his medicals check out, if we don't hear about a combine recheck, and if he gets a clean bill of health, then we might be talking about 5, and if that
changes
happens,
things.
If you really start getting like 4 and 5 guys coming off the board in that top 20, you're going to see some of these guys like a Garrett Wilson, like a Chris Olave, potentially within striking range for Kansas City. They might not get all the way to 29, but they might be on the board in 2021. And you start thinking, okay, now we're in range. We can go get one of these top receivers. So Chiefs fans, when you're listening to this, wherever you are, you want to, rain dances, pull out good luck charms, rabbit's feet, whatever you want. But Carson Strong gets a clean bill of health. Matt Corral had a very good pro day. Maybe people start talking up Sam Howell. The more quarterbacks slide into that top 20, the better your odds will be at getting one of these top flight receivers.
Well, and it isn't just wide receivers, because Kansas City needs help at wide out, but they also need edge. So it could push down some edge players. The thing that I'm going to be very intrigued about is if you get to a point where you have 4 go in the first 20, are you going to have somebody trying to sneak into the back of the first round, trying to get that 5th-year option on a QB? Kansas City, there were 2 picks. That could be a huge deal for them if that happens.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the Carson Strong situation, because maybe he doesn't get a quite clean bill of health, but it's close enough. But you think, look, we could draft him and medically redshirt him, but we're not burning 1 of 4 years. We're burning the first of 5. That could be intriguing to a team. Like, say a team like Detroit decides we're not going to draft a quarterback at 2, but now Carson Strong's sort of in striking range, but we don't know if he's going to be there when we're on the clock at 32. Maybe they try to get up. It's only a couple of spots, but maybe a team at the end of the, at the start of the second round, they're thinking, we'll come up, get a quarterback, get that 5th-year option. So that's another opportunity too. That ability, the allure of the 5th-year option, particularly when it comes to quarterbacks, it sometimes creates an opportunity at the end of the first round.
Well, and you have no idea what kind of draft capital you could get back. Not only that, with those guys coming from the round 2, but if you get one of those early round 2 picks, maybe that even gives you more capital, because who knows who's going to want to trade up when their board gets reset overnight. Yeah, I mean,
there's a common school of thought that in addition to having the first overall pick, having picks early on night 2 is a great opportunity for a team, because we all know how chaotic draft night is, that first round. And when we used to have, the first 2 rounds, it was just pure chaos. And now you've got a chance to sort of reset your board, catch your breath, and there's opportunities over that overnight period into the next day to start moving around, making some phone calls. And so if, for example, Kansas City slides out and now they've got to pick at, say, 35, there's a lot that could be done there in those overnight hours. And, certainly during the day on Friday, and sort of opportunities to accumulate even more draft capital. So having those 2 first-round picks, obviously Kansas City is one of a handful of teams that has that pair in the first round of this draft. There's a lot of different ways you can go about it, a lot of different things you can do with them.
Mark, thank you so much for coming on. We really do appreciate it. Really enjoy your insights. Tell everybody where they can find you again one more time.
Well, Chris, it's always a blast. Love coming on every time we get a chance to catch up. You can follow me on Twitter at Mark Schofield, USA Today's Touchdown Wire, Big Blue View, Blue Green Nation, Pat's Pulpit, blogging the boys over at SB Nation. But the easiest way is on the old Bird app at Mark Schofield.
And he is everywhere. Thank you again, Mark. Really appreciate it. And we will be back tomorrow to talk more about this Chiefs team and maybe we'll get some more information on if they're actually trying to get a trade done with James Bradbury or a wide receiver. So thank you for listening today, and we will talk to you tomorrow.